I think first of all, we should start with just some questions about this presentation. Do you have questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Eduard, your last line there says no real attack so far. Would we even know if there was a real attack?
Well, as I said before, it's difficult to know if there has been a real attack, because when someone with a pacemaker, for example, dies, no one goes to the pacemaker to check the logs of the device and to see if some weird things happen. And this is the reason why he passed. But even in this case, even if you would go to even if you would remove the device from the patient's body and you would analyze the device, it would be difficult to know if this is an attack by an adversary, or this is just that the device maybe malfunction. I mean, there are quite a few of studies that show that implantable medical devices fail quite a lot. But it's a bit difficult to know all these things, because there are some people that have looked at some devices, but we don't have I would say like a wide and detailed study on how often these devices fail. I mean, many times these things are undetected.
All right. JT,
Yeah. I'm just wondering. So, I mean, I personally know at least 5 people who run around with an insulin pump or a pacemaker. Probably many more.
Yeah.
So it feels like the market penetration of these devices is increasing dramatically, right? More and more things are being solved by technical solutions. How do we even do risk assessment for these things? It's maybe also a question to the legal people in the talk. Is this somewhat reflected in current legislation?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about legislation, I will let some of the of the legal people to talk about this.
Well played. All right, next question then, and we'll get back to JT's question later.
Yeah.
Any more questions about, well, let's say the technical aspects of Edo's presentation?
To what extent do you think it's possible to automate these attacks in terms of building a small device that does something bad with all pacemakers in your proximity?
I think it's possible to automate this quite easily. The main limitation is that you need to be close to the patient, of course. So you cannot launch these kind of attacks from your house, from your computer. You need to go very close to the people, and and then you can perform your attacks. So yeah, in terms of device, you can build a device that that maybe gets the serial number of the pacemaker of your victim, and then it builds valid messages. But you cannot perform this attack at automatically to lots of people at the same time.
But I guess the hard part of the attack is anyway all the reverse engineering, right? Once you know the flaws in the system and so on, then it's fairly straightforward to automate the actual attack. But finding the attack, that's the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, also I think that the fact that there are only very few companies that sell pacemakers. I mean, it's very likely that if someone has a pacemaker, the pacemaker comes from I would say maybe 5 companies. There are 5 main companies on this. And I think that now there are studies that show that all these companies have designed pacemakers that are insecure. And most of the times, these protocols are very similar to each other. They are different, so you need to do the work again. But once you've done it once, it's also much easier to do it for another company. And then, I mean, as I said before, once you do it for one company, and then you can most of the times attack quite a few models from this company, if not all.
Nice. All right, then maybe let's start with having a less technical and a more legal view on the practical cases that Edu presented to us. And we have Elisabetta and Erik here with us today, who gave the seminar talk yesterday already and have agreed to join us again today to comment on the legal aspects of these concrete cases here that are reported.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot with respect to all security aspects that as a legal sometimes it's more difficult to grasp. We were first of all thinking about the question before, just to reply briefly. Yes, legislation on cybersecurity, as we explained yesterday, is composed by a series of laws. The most important one is the Medical Device Directive and soon to be applicable Medical Device Regulation, which establishes a risk management approach for manufacturers. And this law essentially sets some safety requirements that include also cybersecurity requirements for the market activities. So, for example, secure design, risk management, and also this concerns technical documentation, etc., but also on post-market activities. And this is what is contained within the law. So these essential requirements, and then there are also standards that manufacturers may rely upon. Concerning the specific case today, for me it was quite interesting what Dr. Marin said about the fact that, for example, if an incident occurs, for example, on a pacemaker, then it's quite difficult, if I understood correctly, to see logs to establish whether that was an incident caused by someone or a malfunction of the device itself. So for me, this aspect is really important. It could be very relevant also in determining responsibility of that kind of incident having implied a harm to a patient. And it's really tricky to see here responsibility under a legal point of view. And as we were also presenting yesterday for those who might have not attended the seminar, also under an ethical point of view, the guidelines at EU level that have been provided by Medical Device Coordination Group that are especially on medical devices cybersecurity issued last December, that follow up an approach undertaken at international level. They say that cybersecurity is a shared responsibility or a joint responsibility, and at the same time, it's difficult to specify every actor that might be involved. There are manufacturers, but there are also, for example, operators, healthcare professionals, and for example, and I think it was very interesting to see there, the international guidance was referring to vulnerability finders, for example, where in Europe that was not mentioned. So this was the first thought I had on the cases that we were reflecting upon, the fact that, for example, you cannot see the logs, as you were saying, and that is quite a challenge for determining responsibility. Erik, would you like to add something or different kinds of consideration, maybe?
No, I think you explained very well.
All right, thank you. Good. Do we have more questions then to the speaker or to Elisabetta and Erik?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask if these directives from the European Union are a sort of recommendation, or is there any way to enforce this?
No, directives are laws that are applicable without exception. These are not recommendations. These are laws that have to be respected at all times. Directives are different from regulations. So directives set a minimum level of how to explain this. So directives, they set, yes, a minimum level of harmonization of laws or of rules that have to be applied throughout all member states of the European Union. But each member state is allowed to set stricter rules. While a regulation, when you have regulation, it has to be applied in each member state as such. You can't impose stricter or weaker rules. So it has to be just as it's written in the regulation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if I may add also, medical device law especially is, some call it a multi-level regulation. And so it's quite complicated by some researcher academics in legal studies and regulation studies have described quite well the fact that you have regulations and directives at EU level. But for example, the guidelines that we were referring to before, these are soft law. And also you need to take into account that there are also some administrative bodies that have the duties in analyzing the fact that the requirements that are set in those legal acts are respected as regards to safety requirements that are foreseen by the legislation. So it's a system that goes from the EU level to the national level, and at this specific moment we are in between two different kinds of regulations. So yeah, just want to add this. It's quite complex.
Mm-hmm.
And when Elisabetta says soft law, she means that guidelines are guidelines is a document that actually it's not you can't enforce it as such. However, if it comes from EU body, in this case, you have guidelines, for example, by the European Commission expert group on medical devices, cybersecurity, for example. You can't enforce them, but it's likely that, for example, Court of Justice, which is the highest body allowed to interpret EU legislation, so the court will take them into account. However, it's not obliged to take them into account. Also, manufacturer is not obliged to take them into account, but if you end up in front of the court, you will have to explain, I mean, you have to have a good reason and good argument why you're not complying with certain guidelines that do come from a specific expert group. So of course you are not obliged to follow them. There is no way of enforcing them like other laws like directive or regulation. But yeah, they are in principle it's up to you to, as a manufacturer, to follow them or not.
Thank you. Edo, you have more questions?
Well, it looks very interesting, I think. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you keep wondering why. I mean, I don't know exactly when these regulations were created, because yeah, I've read some of these documents. I'm not sure if all of them, and sometimes they seem a bit too general to me and very vague.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't
go. No, it's fine. Go.
I wanted to say that I fully agree with you that they seem very general. We are actually writing a paper now, and we hope to have it published. Actually, it's supposed to be published anytime soon. So we also argue in this paper that very often, for example, if we say now what we saw at EU level is that EU legislator and also expert groups, they're all saying cybersecurity of medical devices is a joint responsibility. Okay, that sounds great, but how exactly this is supposed to be done, it's not clear. So I see where your comment is coming from, and it's true that it's not clear, and maybe in the future it will become, when the topic becomes even more pressing than it is now, maybe it will become more clear how to address this and how to be more specific. But at the same time, it's also difficult to be very specific because you kind of have to. I mean, it's just the style of EU law that has to be written in a certain way. So, but yeah, I agree. I agree with this comment.
If I may add and provide an historical note, this kind of regulation, which are product regulation, historically have been regulated in the EU with a so-called new approach. I know that in the audience there are quite some experts in this kind of area, so I will be very careful in explaining it. But so according to the new approach, there is also some kind of orientation in giving regulated entities also more room to, for example, to have a risk management approach, or to choose, for example, the measures that they deem more important for their product. So, for example, the directive, the directive and the medical device directive provides essential requirements, and so manufacturers have the possibility to abide by the essential requirement using a risk management approach, and they can demonstrate conformity through CE marking. So it's an established framework that gives more room, for example, to manufacturers. So there is also this is also the reason why the rules appear to be open, let's say, because the legislator tried to give more room for manufacturers, because the law was becoming too specific, and there was, let's say, a pacing problem in following those kinds of requirements. And that was the approach that led to this. And finally, as a final remark, the MDR was recently approved because, as you may have been familiar with, especially 4 or 5 years ago, there was the so-called PIP scandal. The fact that those people that had, there was a huge scandal for breast implants, but also for some kinds of other medical devices. So the European legislator moved from this for the fact that medical devices needs to be more, let's say, safer for patients, to establish more transparency measures for like a EU common database for this. So that was also this kind of historical reason why we see the rules as they are now.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, hi Edu. I have one question not related to the technical aspects, but you mentioned at the end that there isn't any real attack on heart implants or these implantable devices. But wasn't there a story about Dick Cheney's heart implant? What was that about? Was it? I don't remember, but I think there was. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the story of Dick Cheney, so he wasn't killed in this way. I mean, I actually don't know if he's dead or not.
I don't think he's dead yet, but
yeah, I know that Homeland was inspired on this story of so this is the former vice president of the US. And Homeland, the TV series, was inspired on his story of, where he asked his doctor to disable his wireless interface, but nothing happened to him, as far as I know.
So okay, it wasn't actually an attack, but they were afraid of attacks. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I have another question I would like to ask. So it's not related to what we were discussing before, but it's a different one. I think that a common question that some people doing offensive research have always is about doing their research in a way that we can sort of be free to do the research that we want without being sued by these companies. What's the state of this issue now? I mean, I know that, for example, some companies have some bounty programs where they try to encourage researchers to find vulnerabilities in their products. But I think, I'm not sure if Leonard is connected here, but I think that when we did the work on Tesla, the company changed some of the, so in the page that they had for the people to report vulnerabilities, I think that they changed some of the conditions or some of the rules. I mean, how does this work more generally? I mean, if a manufacturer claims in their website that they will not sue you if you notify them about the findings that you discover, is this something that is this something that you can use as a proof to defend yourself if they eventually sue you?
So from my side, I have to admit that this is a field I would like to research more, also in light of your presentation, and also because I've been hearing some presentation of colleagues that have been dealing with this specific topic, not on medical devices, but on vulnerability disclosure. But to be honest, I really would like to dive more into this topic. But at the moment, my findings are not yet there. I don't know if I wants to add something or other.
No, I'm also not aware of the case law on this and what the practices are.
So Edu, Leonard had just left 1 minute before you asked the question, but I asked him to come back. He's going to come back. But he doesn't have a microphone, so you can ask the question, and he will then type the answer by chat.
Okay.
Hang on 1 minute. Any other questions in the meantime?
Yeah.
Shall we close the session or wait, or?
I would give it half a minute more. Leonard said he would join.
Okay, then I make a quick announcement in the meantime. We haven't planned a seminar for August yet, but now there will be one. Fieke Janssen, colleague of ours from University of Cardiff, is going to give a presentation on predictive policing, technologies behind that, ethics, effectiveness, and of course the legitimacy of these procedures. So that's going to be in mid-August, let's say after the 17th. I'm welcoming you all of it, and there will be an announcement mail coming soon.
All right, perfect length. Leonard has joined us back. So Edu, if you ask the question again.
Yeah, I think that you, Leonard, found it in the page, in the Tesla page, where you can find all the steps that you need to follow to report vulnerabilities. If I remember correctly, I mean, it's been a long time, so I don't know exactly what the details were. But I remember that you mentioned that they changed some of the terms and conditions in the page, and you were wondering if they could somehow sue people who find vulnerabilities in their products. Let's see what Leonard says now.
If you're saying something, Leonard, we cannot hear you.
He's writing in the chat. So he put the page.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a link to the page where Tesla describes their process for reporting security vulnerabilities. And since Leonard saw this page first, at some point in the meantime, they changed certain terms. So the concrete issues that we found out in this paper that Edu's report is referring to, they were not immediately related to a product of Tesla, but by something that Tesla used.
Yeah, well.
And so I think according to the new terms that you can find on this page that describes the process, well, our findings wouldn't really comply with the terms of Tesla. I guess that means that what does it mean when you say that the terms do not comply?
I mean, I guess that we are not protected by what they say in the page.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess so too.
Can I add something as well on your question?
Sure.
So I think you have, I don't know exactly what you're aiming at, but I think you have to make a distinction between criminal liability or civil liability. I don't know too much about civil liability when you're talking about suing the security researcher or the one who has disclosed to the vulnerability. So maybe it would be an idea to invite someone, a speaker about civil liability, but I gave a seminar on the criminal liability part of vulnerability disclosures a couple of months ago. And the conclusion of my seminar was that in most of the times the provisions on hacking in the criminal codes are very broad. So that they apply as well to security researchers, but that does not mean that they are sued a lot. So I didn't find a lot of cases about security researchers being exposed to criminal sentences. So, but there again, there is like a big difference between what's in the criminal code and what is the reality.
Michiel wants to say something.
Yes, I'm not an expert in civil liability either, but I studied a bit product liability directive and its revision. And I know that they are considering several new obligations and also maybe considering to have software included in the product liability directive. And also next to the manufacturer, the deployer of products in terms of the directive would then be held liable. And I know that they are also considering the possibility of like logging by design, and that if you fail to provide the victim with these means of recording information, then there could be a presumption that you're liable under the product liability directive. But still, it's only planning a revision, and there's nothing concrete. But maybe this could also become relevant for security researchers and deployers in the future.
Thank you. So in the meantime, Leonard basically, posted the relevant parts from that page, where first Tesla promises, they say we encourage responsible reporting of vulnerabilities. We will not take legal action against you, nor ask the law enforcement to investigate your case. And all of that refers to security research, and then somewhere later on the same page they define that security research is limited to, and then comes a list of certain parts of a car, which means basically that if you do security research on anything else, then I guess their promise to not take legal action doesn't hold anymore. So that's quite interesting. So if you say you can report responsibly, but only about the wheels and the mirror and not anything else, and otherwise we can sue you, that's of course kind of making it a lot less interesting. Is that what you meant, Edu?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Good. Are there any more questions or comments? Let me see.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking about maybe if in the future they further develop like whistleblower protection or ethical hacking protection, this could also help, especially whistleblowing protection, which is already being reinforced. But I might imagine if you discover a vulnerability, and maybe you could also fall under this, or maybe this could be explored to what extent you could fall under this. So yeah, just as a small remark.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, JT or Sophie, any more announcements? I don't think
No,
so, right?
I think we're done.
No.
In general, I guess and I hope that by now everyone is aware of the website that Jan Tobias set up. So there you always find the upcoming seminars. You'll find slides, and soon also if and when available, the videos of older seminars. You find information on how to subscribe to the mailing list. So that's, of course, you are on the mailing list, but you can forward this to other people who are not yet. And then I guess the next seminar will be the one in August, where we're still looking exactly for the date. But well, JT just talked about it. So there's going to be one in August, and then afterwards again talks in September, October, November, and so on. Then we close the session here. I wish you nice holidays if you take some, and we'll see you in August. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.